My mother was smiling when she handed me a sippy cup the moment I stepped inside after 56 days at sea. Surprise? We turned Liam's office into a nursery for your sister's baby. Family doesn't need paperwork, sweetheart. My father laughed and added, "Stop being selfish, Scarlett. He's been dead for 4 years. You're just a widow living in a museum. Move on already." They had completely gutted my late husband's memorial room, threw his Coast Guard medal, the folded flag from his funeral, and his final journal into a dumpster like trash. I stood there in shock, covered in sea salt, and didn't raise my voice. I simply took out my phone and made one call. 5 minutes later, their smiles completely disappeared when they realized my husband had prepared something devastating for them from beyond the grave. My name is Scarlett Bennett Swift. I'm 37 years old. If you've ever had your family disrespect your deepest pain and call it love, this one's for you. Drop a comment with the city you're listening from and subscribe so the next story finds you. Now let me take you back to the morning I docked in Charleston, before I knew what they had done. On a no-AA research vessel, you learn to ration your voice. 8 minutes a week, 3 minutes per person, and you save the last 60 seconds for the dog you don't have anymore. For 56 days, I had been Marine Observation Lead on the RV Ronald H. Brown, tracking pre-season tropical activity in the Gulf of Mexico. No phone signal except a scheduled satellite window every Saturday evening. No internet, no social media, just steel, salt, and barometric pressure charts that kept getting more interesting as April moved toward May. I stood the final pre-dawn watch on Sunday, April 26th. The Charleston jetties came into view at 14 nautical miles. The sea was glass. The barometer read 30.18 inches of mercury. I handed off the log to my relief and walked down to the mess for one last cup of bad coffee. My satellite phone released its backlog as we entered cellular coverage. 14 voicemails, 28 text messages. I scrolled them in the bridge wing while the sun came up. 3 voicemails from my mother. All of them cheerful. All of them vague. One from my sister Charlotte. I had not heard from Charlotte in 19 weeks before that voicemail. Charlotte had never in her life called me just to check in. I noticed that detail. I let it sit. One voicemail from Rosalind Hartwell, my neighbor of 28 years. The widow of Senior Chief Petty Officer Hartwell, United States Navy, who had passed away in 2019. Marked urgent. Time stamped Saturday, April 18th, 7:32 in the morning. I did not play Rosalind's voicemail standing on a bridge wing in front of an ensign. Rosalind Hartwell was a Navy chief's widow. The first lesson her husband had ever taught her was that calm is the loudest signal. If Rosalind had called me at 7:32 on a Saturday and marked it urgent, I was going to listen to it sitting down, in my truck, alone. I cleared customs. I shook the captain's hand. I shouldered my sea bag and walked to the parking lot at the Charleston Maritime Terminal, where my gray Ford F-150 had been waiting under the same live oak for 56 days. I sat in the cab. I put the phone on the dashboard. I played Rosalind's voicemail. "Honey," her voice said, "when you get this, don't let your mother open the door first. I'll explain everything when you're home. Drive slow." That was the entire message. 11 seconds. Then silence. I did not call her back. Rosalind would have said what she needed to say if she could have said it in a voicemail. The fact that she had not meant the rest of it had to be said in person. I looked at my lock screen. There was a text from my mother, sent the day before, the last text before I had hit shore. "Don't worry about the house. We took care of everything," followed by a sparkle emoji. My mother was 63 years old. My mother had told me at a Christmas dinner in 2019 that punctuation was the language of polite people, and emojis were the way illiterates communicated. My mother had never sent a sparkle emoji in her entire life. I started the truck. I drove the speed limit. Highway 17 through Mount Pleasant was Sunday quiet. The dogwoods were past their bloom. The Cooper River Bridge had 2 stoplights worth of weekend traffic, and at the second one I thought about something Liam had told me, leaning against the kitchen counter the night before our wedding. You investigate slowly, Scarlett. That's how you find what's actually true. The ocean doesn't lie. People do. And the ocean takes longer to read. I turned onto Magnolia Court at 4:07 in the afternoon. The first thing I saw was not my house. The first thing I saw was Rosalind Hartwell standing at the end of her own driveway, in a yellow bathrobe pulled over jeans, holding her phone the way a chaplain holds a folded flag. She was looking right at me. I pulled into Rosalind's driveway instead of my own. She opened the passenger door before the truck had finished rolling to a stop. Honey, she said, I've been waiting since Tuesday. I have photos. She did not climb in. She did not ask how my voyage had been. She held out her phone face up so I could see the home screen. The album was already open. 53 photographs, 1 11-second video. The earliest timestamp was Thursday, April 16th, 11:19 in the morning. My husband was Navy 34 years, Rosalind said. I know what a folded flag means. I know what it doesn't mean. And I know who threw what into that dumpster across the street. I looked across the street. There was a 10-yard construction dumpster blocking half my driveway. The side of it read, Donnelly Renovations, Mount Pleasant SC, family owned since 1998. Behind the dumpster, parked in front of my garage, was a silver Audi Q5 with a maternity sticker on the back window. My sister Charlotte's car. Through the chain slats of the dumpster, I could see a roll of pink wallpaper lying on its side like a body. I could see chunks of drywall. I could see a piece of the cedar window seat I had once read to Liam from on the Sunday morning he came home from his second-to-last deployment. I could see, sticking out from under a sheet of insulation, the corner of a triangular folded flag, the blue field of stars. 3 stars completely soaked through. Don't go inside yet, Rosalind said. Look in the dumpster first, otherwise you won't make it back out. I walked across the street alone. I did not climb in yet. I just stood at the edge and looked. There is no word for the temperature a folded flag becomes when it has been rained on by people who knew what it was. There is no word for the sound a window seat makes after it has been pried out of a wall by someone who didn't build it. I took out my phone. I photographed the dumpster from 4 angles. I photographed the Donnelly Renovations panel with its company phone number. I photographed Charlotte's Audi. I photographed the silver corner of something metallic, half buried under the insulation, something the shape and color of a bronze medallion. Then I walked up my front steps. The door was already half open. A man I had never seen before was standing in my entryway, holding a cordless drill. Late 30s. T-shirt with a contractor logo. He looked at me for 2 full seconds before recognizing me. The sea wind had darkened my face, and I was carrying a duffel bag with USCG Vessel Tender stenciled on the strap. Then his face changed into a host's smile. Hey, you're back early. Come see what we did. Charlotte's gonna lose her mind when she sees you. It was my brother-in-law Mason. I had not seen Mason since Christmas. I did not return the smile. I did not hand him my bag. I walked past him. On the console table behind the door, on top of a 4-week mail pile that nobody had bothered to sort, was an unopened envelope addressed to me in formal type. The return address read, Crawford Veterans Legal Group, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. The postmark was March 30th. Edmund Crawford had written. Edmund Crawford had tried to warn me through the mail before I left port. I had been at sea when it arrived. I would read it later. For now, I knew the man my husband had hired 4.5 years ago was already trying to reach me. I walked into my own living room. My mother was sitting on my couch with a child's plastic sippy cup in her right hand. My father was in my husband's old recliner. My sister Charlotte was stretched on the sofa with a pregnancy pillow under her belly, eating Greek yogurt out of one of my bowls. My nephew Brooks, who would turn 3 in June, was on the floor playing with a wooden brio train. The same brio train my late mother-in-law had given me at the funeral in November of 2021. The train I had sealed inside a labeled box and placed on the top shelf of Liam's office closet. The box had been locked. There was exactly one spare key to that closet in this entire house. My mother had asked for it in May of 2022 to water the plants. My mother stood up, set down the sippy cup, and smiled at me the way a hostess smiles at a baby shower guest. "Sweetheart, oh my, you're early. Come give your mother a hug. You smell like the ocean." She was wearing a light blue blouse with pearl buttons. It was the same blouse she had worn to my husband's funeral on November 27, 2021. I did not hug her. I looked at the wall above the sofa where Liam's commission certificate had hung for 4 years and 5 months. The wall was empty. A single nail remained. My mother followed my eyes, then began the speech she had clearly rehearsed for 56 days. "Honey, we didn't want to bother you at sea. Charlotte's due in July. 3rd trimester is so hard, especially in this low country heat." The office was just sitting there. Liam wasn't using it, and family doesn't need paperwork. Charlotte's blood. That's all the paperwork we need. My father stood up out of the recliner like he was opening a board meeting. My father had spent 31 years running a small house painting outfit in North Charleston. He had not run a board meeting in his life, but he liked the posture. "Scarlett, I made an executive decision. I'm the head of this family. I hired a top contractor. We did it as a gift. You've been holding on to a ghost for too long." He said ghost in the same tone he used to say shed when he wanted me to clean it out as a teenager. Then he reached into his back pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and set it on the coffee table like he was laying down a winning card. "It's all in here. We did a family rate, $400 a month, pure family. Nothing complicated." I picked it up. It was 2 pages, printed at Office Depot, in Times New Roman, 12-point. The title was Family Use Agreement. The line marked property owner was signed by my father. The signature read Warren Swift, and below it, in parentheses, in my father's handwriting, the title he had invented for himself. Property owner, Swift family. Property owner. Swift family is not a thing. It has never been a thing. It is not a legal entity. It is not a corporate title. It is not anything my father had any authority to be. My name appeared nowhere on the document. The word trust appeared nowhere on the document. There were no witness signatures. There was no notary stamp. The reverse side of the document was completely blank. It was the blankest piece of paper in the room, and that was the first thing that told me they had no idea what they had walked into. I turned the document over twice. I did not speak. My father took my silence as agreement. "Liam was a practical man. He wouldn't want you living in a museum. You're 37. Stop being selfish, Liam." My father had not spoken Liam's name once in this house in 4.5 years. Not at the funeral, not at the wake, not at Thanksgiving 2021 or 2022 or 2023 or 2024 or 2025, not at Christmas, not at any holiday. He had referred to Liam for 4.5 years only as your husband or him. In the last 90 seconds, my father had used Liam's name 3 times. My sister Charlotte, from the sofa, said, "He'd want the baby to be safe and happy in a real room, Scarlett." Mason looked at his shoes. Brooks crashed the wooden train into the leg of the recliner. I did not respond to any of them. I walked past my mother, past my father, past Charlotte, down the hallway, toward the door of the room they had not yet shown me. I had been delaying. I had been keeping it whole in my mind for 1 more minute. I had been letting myself remember the way the doorknob had felt when I left, 56 days ago, before all of this. The smell of fresh latex paint reached me 5 feet before the door. I stopped at the threshold and looked. In the autumn of 2015, I was 26 years old and brand new to no AA. I had been at the Charleston Maritime Officers Reception, sitting at the bar, reading a printout of the barometric pressure trace for Tropical Depression 11. A young Coast Guard lieutenant in service dress whites had sat down next to me, glanced at the printout, and said, "You know hurricanes can wait a few minutes for you to drink. They've been waiting 100 million years." I had married him 21 months later on Sullivan's Island, on a Saturday morning in June of 2017. My grandmother had walked me down a wooden boardwalk in flat sandals. Liam had worn dress whites. There had been 46 people present, and one Coast Guard ensign holding a folded American flag he was very nervous not to drop. On our honeymoon at Tybee Island, Liam had bought us a lighthouse keychain in a souvenir shop. Brass. Slightly off balance in the hand. He had paid a man with a small engraving machine $7 to put our initials on it. BS plus LBS, June 24th, 2017. The hinge had been weak from the day we bought it. Liam had said, "I'll fix it next weekend." He had said that, in various forms, about every small broken thing in our life together, for the rest of his life. We bought a 4-bedroom low-country cottage in Mount Pleasant in October of 2018. The upstairs window faced east toward the Atlantic. Liam called the house the lighthouse because he said it kept his eyes on the right horizon. We hung a Coast Guard ensign on the front porch on every service birthday. We invited his crew over for boiled peanuts in the fall. On Friday, October 15th, 2021, Liam disappeared for the entire morning. He came home at 12:43 in the afternoon, carrying a thick manila envelope with the United States Coast Guard seal in the corner. I asked him where he had been. He said, "Just paperwork, sweetheart. The boring kind. The kind that lets us keep our promises even if we forget." He put the envelope in the small office safe behind the bookshelf. He turned the combination wheel back to 0. He kissed the top of my head and said, "You won't have to open it, I promise. But if you ever do, Edmund knows what to do. So does Tate." I had asked him who Edmund was. He had said, "An attorney I trust, the kind who answers his phone on a Sunday." I had not pressed him. Liam had a tendency to do quiet, careful things for the people he loved without announcing them. I had let it go. 33 days later, on Thursday, November 18th, 2021, a 41-foot Coast Guard response boat went into the water off Cape Hatteras in the worst late-season nor'easter the Mid-Atlantic had seen in years. A trawler had lost engine power and was being pushed onto the bar. Liam was officer in charge of the rescue boat. They got every member of the trawler crew off the water alive. The response boat itself never made it back. I was informed on Friday morning, November 19th, by 2 officers in service dress, standing on my front porch under the porch light I had been about to turn off because it was already 8 in the morning. The flag was folded by Coast Guardsmen on the lawn of the Mount Pleasant Memorial Gardens on Saturday, November 27th. My mother attended in a light blue blouse with pearl buttons. My father did not speak at the service. He had not known Liam well, despite 5 years of holidays. He had referred to Liam at one Thanksgiving as the boy in the Navy uniform. In the first 3 weeks of December 2021, I moved every object that had belonged to my husband into a single room on the east side of the house. His USCG service dress uniform on the back of the door. His commission certificate on the east wall. The folded flag in a triangular glass case on the second shelf of his bookcase. His Coast Guard medal, awarded posthumously for life-saving valor outside the line of personal safety, mounted on a small navy blue display card and hung on a nail Liam had driven into the drywall in 2019 with a level and his grandfather's hammer. He had been so proud of how straight that nail was. He had told me so twice. I had kept the room for 4 years and 5 months. I had not lived in it. I had not slept in it. I had used it only on Sunday mornings, with coffee, with his journal open on the desk. I had never called it a memorial. I had called it the room, because every other room was just where I lived without him. The east window faced the Atlantic. The reading chair waited. The bookshelf bracket had 3 screws, and the third one was always slightly loose because Liam had said, "I'll fix it next weekend." one weekend in October 2021, and had never come home from the weekend after. And then, after 56 days at sea, I opened the door. The walls were no longer navy blue. They were pale, baby pink. A wallpaper border of white bunnies ran around the top of the room. The hinges of the door creaked the same way. Everything else in the room had been replaced. The hinges remembered me. Nothing else did. I did not step inside right away. I just stood in the threshold and let my eyes catalog what was no longer there. A white IKEA-style crib was assembled in the exact spot where Liam's desk used to stand. Above it, where his commission certificate had hung, was a pastel-quilted wall hanging. Sailboats, tiny anchors, the words "Little Sailor" stitched in cursive across the bottom. They had picked the sailboat theme like it was a coincidence, like they had not replaced one sailor with a cartoon of him. I walked slowly to the wall. I touched the nail with the back of my index finger. The nail was still there. They had not removed it. Whoever had hung the new quilt had used the existing nail because it was already at the right height. I photographed the nail. I photographed the empty wall. I photographed the wall hanging from below at an angle that showed Liam's nail aligning exactly with the bottom edge of the quilt. I photographed the spot on the floor where his desk had stood. I photographed the corner of the room where the reading chair used to be. Behind me, in the doorway, I heard my mother's voice. Charlotte picked the colors. "Isn't it, darling? We saved the curtains, I think. They might be in the garage, or maybe the attic. We can find them later." Liam wouldn't recognize the place. That's the whole point, right? Fresh start. She was holding the sippy cup like a tour guide holding a brochure. I did not turn to look at her. I walked past her. I walked down the hall, through the kitchen, out the back door, across the small patch of crabgrass at the side of my house, to the dumpster. That was the moment I stopped being a daughter. I climbed into the dumpster in my work boots. I did not speak. I pulled out a sheet of fiberglass insulation. Under it, pieces of the cedar window seat. Romex wire. Drywall. Under the drywall, folded but soaked, half-pinned by a chunk of 2x4, was the triangular cotton flag from my husband's funeral. I lifted it out with both hands. The cotton was heavy with rainwater. The blue field of stars was visible. 3 of the stars were soaked completely through. The glass case it had lived inside for 4.5 years was nowhere in the dumpster. Someone had broken it. There is no word for the temperature a folded flag becomes when it has been rained on by people who knew what it was. I set the flag on the curb beside the dumpster. Underneath where the flag had been, half-pinned in the same way, was a torn cardboard box. The flaps were open. Inside the box, the Coast Guard medal on its small navy blue display card, the ribbon water-stained but intact. The lighthouse keychain with the engraving still legible despite the rain, BS plus LBS, June 24, 2017. The hinge fully broken now, the brass loop separated from the body, and the spine of a leather journal. Liam's last journal, the one he had been keeping the night before he died. Rosalind was on the curb beside me without my hearing her cross the street. She was still in her bathrobe. She held out her phone, brightness maxed. She did not speak for a moment. She let me see the album. 53 photographs. Thursday, April 16th, 11:19 in the morning, through Sunday, April 26th, 6:53 this morning. 1 video clip, 11 seconds long, dated Saturday, April 18th, 7:14. She played the clip. The video showed my father and Mason standing at the open mouth of the dumpster. Each of them was holding a black trash bag. They tipped the bags. The contents tumbled in. The shapes of a folded flag, a small bronze medal, and a leather-bound book were visible in the air for less than a second before they hit. In the audio, clear and unhurried, my father said, "Just dump it, she won't even notice." Then the clip cut. Rosalind lowered the phone. She did not speak for several seconds. Then she said, "My husband died in 2019. I learned that morning what a folded flag means to a woman who knows what to do with it. I've been waiting for you to come home, she added. I airdropped you everything, it's already on your phone. I sat down on the curb in front of the dumpster. I picked up Liam's journal. The cover was water-warped. The leather was cool. There was a small ribbon marker, navy blue, tucked between 2 pages near the front. I opened it to the ribbon. The page was dated Friday, October 15th, 2021. Liam's handwriting. The same precise, slightly slanted handwriting that had written my name in the wedding register 4 years earlier. I read the first paragraph. Today I built a wall around Scarlett. Edmund knows. Tate knows. I won't tell her unless I have to. If she ever has to use what I signed, it will mean someone closer than a stranger has decided she isn't a person anymore. I hope it sits in a drawer forever. But I am not going to leave her unguarded. I turned one more page. The next entry was dated Wednesday, November 17th, 2021, 6:42 in the evening, the night before he died. The first line of the entry read, "Tell Scarlett family is not the people who share her blood. It's the ones who guard what she loves when she can't." I did not finish the entry on the curb. I closed the journal. I stood up. The sky over Mount Pleasant was the gray-pink of late April low-country evening, the streetlight not yet on. Rosalind stood beside me, not speaking. I opened my phone. 2 contacts were pinned to the top of my favorites list. I had pinned them in December of 2021, in the first numb week after the funeral, because Liam had said their names twice, and I had been afraid I would forget them. Tate. USCG Charleston. Edmund Crawford, Trust. I tapped Tate first. Commander Tate Robinson answered on the second ring, the first time I had ever called him on a Sunday. I told him in 5 sentences what I had walked into. Tate did not ask a single follow-up question. Tate did not say, "Wait, slow down." Tate did not say, "Are you sure?" Tate said, "Ma'am, I'm putting on the uniform. I'll be at your house in 22 minutes. Do not move the medal. Do not move the flag. Do not move the journal. They are evidence now." Then he paused for 1 full second. "And Scarlett, I've been waiting for this call for 4.5 years. I just hoped I wouldn't get it. I transferred from Hampton Roads back to Sector Charleston in 2024 in case I did." I ended the call. I tapped Edmund. Edmund Crawford picked up on the 3rd ring from his cell phone. There was the sound of a child laughing in the background. He was at home with his grandchildren. I told him in 4 sentences. Edmund went silent for 3 full seconds. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was the voice of a man who had been preparing for a call he had hoped never to take. "Mrs. Bennett Swift, are you safe?" I said I was. "Stay where you are. I'm driving to the office now to pull the file. I will be at your house by 7:15. Do not sign anything anyone puts in front of you. Do not pay anyone anything. Do not move anything in that room. And do not let your parents leave the house until I get there." He paused. "Mrs. Bennett Swift, your husband thought of this. He thought of exactly this. There is a clause. Clause 7.3. Then I called the number on the side of the dumpster. Patrick Donnelly answered on the 4th ring. There was the sound of a Sunday afternoon barbecue in the background, someone calling him Dad, a screen door closing. I told him who I was. I told him I had just come home from 56 days at sea. I told him I was standing next to his dumpster, looking at items that had been thrown into it. I told him what some of those items were. I said the words, United States Coast Guard Commission Certificate, and folded flag, and Coast Guard medal. Patrick Donnelly was silent for 8 full seconds. Then he said, "Mrs. Bennett Swift, I am going to ask my wife to take the kids to her sister's house. I will be at your house at 6 in the morning tomorrow, with a sworn affidavit. And with a check refunding every dollar your father paid me." He paused. "Your father told me it was a hoarder room left by a previous owner. He showed me his driver's license. He never showed me a title. My brother is a Navy chaplain. If I had known what was in that room, I would have walked off that job and called the police. I will not be the contractor who painted over a fallen Coast Guard officer. I put the phone in my back pocket. I picked up the flag, wrapped it carefully inside the lining of my field jacket so the wet cotton would not touch the metal. I picked up the Coast Guard medal in its display card. I picked up the lighthouse keychain. I picked up the journal. I walked back across the street toward my own front door. Through the front window, I saw my father in Liam's recliner drinking from a mug. I recognized the mug. It was Liam's USCG Academy alumni mug. Class motto in white print on a navy field. Liam had drunk coffee from it every morning of our marriage. There is a moment when grief stops being weight and starts being leverage. I felt it on the doormat. I opened my front door without ringing. I walked into the dining room. My mother stood up. The sippy cup forgotten on the coffee table. I laid the 4 items on my dining room table in a row, in the order I had recovered them. The flag, the medal, the keychain, the journal. I did not speak. Eileen, my mother, started to say something. I raised one finger. Not in anger. Like a person silencing a phone call. You will sit down. You will listen quietly. You will not interrupt the man who is about to walk through that door. Brooks, my nephew, who had been quiet on the floor by Liam's recliner, looked up and pointed at the medal. Auntie, what's that? I said quietly. Sweetheart, that's a promise your uncle made. Before I go any further, let me say this directly to you. If you're still with me, if you've ever come home to a place that should have been yours and found that the people who share your blood had decided you didn't get to keep it, stay close. What my husband wrote on a single piece of paper in October of 2021 is the reason I'm able to tell this story without crying. If you've ever felt like a piece of paper might be the only wall between you and the people who claim to love you, comment the word wall below. I'll know what you mean. At 7:13 in the evening, the front doorbell rang. Edmund Crawford walked in carrying a manila folder with the same United States Coast Guard seal that Liam had brought home in October of 2021. He was in his early 60s, navy suit, no tie, reading glasses on a small chain around his neck. He nodded at me once, a small, formal nod, and walked to the head of my dining room table. He sat down. He opened the folder. He did not look at my mother or my sister. He looked directly at my father. Mr. Swift, my name is Edmund Crawford. I represent the Bennett Swift Living Trust, established October 15, 2021. Your son-in-law was my client. I would like you to read paragraph 7.3 aloud. He slid the document across the table. My father reached for it. The paper trembled slightly in his hand. He cleared his throat and began to read. In the event that the dedicated office space identified as room B2 in the property at... His voice stopped. He had reached the words, room B2, and he had realized that was the room he had just gutted. Edmund waited 2 seconds. Then he reached across the table, took the document back gently, and read the rest of paragraph 7.3 aloud himself. He read in a calm, unhurried legal cadence. He did not raise his voice once. He explained that material alteration of room B2, defined in the trust as the room dedicated to memorial preservation of LCDR Liam Bennett Swift, without the prior written consent of the trustee, triggered automatic reversion of the entire property and the death benefit investment account to the named contingent beneficiary. The named contingent beneficiary was the United States Coast Guard Mutual Assistance Fund, unless restoration of room B2 was completed within 90 days, at the personal expense of the responsible party, with an additional penalty equal to 50% of the appraised value of any irreplaceable items destroyed in the process. My father very quietly asked, "What's the property worth?" Edmund answered without checking a page. The property is currently appraised at $680,000. Combined with Lieutenant Commander Bennett Swift's death benefit investment account, the total trust value is $1.8 million. That is the figure the United States Coast Guard Mutual Assistance Fund will collect, in cash, if the restoration of room B2 is not certified complete by Saturday, July 25th of this year. He let that sit. Then he slid one more page across the table. And there is one more clause your son-in-law added that day. Clause 9.1. He explained Clause 9.1 in 2 sentences. Any individual who personally signed a contract for the alteration of room B2 bore additional personal liability of $25,000 per violation. That liability was not subject to joint distribution. It belonged only to the signatory. My father had signed the contract with Donnelly Renovations. My father alone owed the additional $25,000. No one in this room could share that burden with him. Edmund looked up directly at my father for the first time. This clause was not written for you, Mr. Swift. It was written for tonight. My father set the document down very slowly. He did not pick up his coffee. He did not pick up Liam's USCG Academy alumni mug. He sat in Liam's recliner with both hands flat on his knees and stared at the wet flag on my dining room table. My mother reached for the sippy cup on the coffee table. The only object within her reach that she could still claim was hers. Her hand shook. Charlotte, on the sofa, said quietly, "Mom, that's Brooks's." My mother set the sippy cup back down. Mason had quietly opened his phone and was typing the word attorney into a search bar. At 7:31, the doorbell rang again. I opened my front door for the second time in 20 minutes. Deputy LaSalle of the Charleston County Sheriff's Office was on my porch in civil standby uniform. Female, mid-40s, very calm. Beside her stood 2 enlisted United States Coast Guardsmen in service dress, each holding 2 empty acid-free archival evidence bags. Behind them, in full service dress blues, was Commander Tate Robinson. Tate's ribbon rack included a small silver star, a personal commemoration of his fallen brother. He had worn it for 4.5 years. Deputy LaSalle said, "Ma'am, this is a civil standby. No one is in trouble tonight, but no one is leaving this house until your attorney finishes his statement." Tate looked me in the eye and said 3 words. "Permission to enter, ma'am?" I nodded. Tate walked into my dining room. He saw the medal on the table. He came to attention briefly. Then he went down on one knee. He did not kneel to me. He knelt to the flag. The room was silent for 10 full seconds. Then he stood up, turned to my father, and spoke directly to him. "Mr. Swift, the night before Lieutenant Commander Bennett Swift left for his final mission, he and I spoke on the phone for 41 minutes. He asked me to make him a promise. He told me his wife should never have to fight alone for what he had built. I told him I would not let it come to that. I was wrong. I'm here now." He paused. "The United States Coast Guard Mutual Assistance Fund has been notified. A representative is en route. Ms. Margot Kenwood will arrive within 15 minutes. Edmund had quietly placed his cell phone, screen up, in the center of the dining room table. Patrick Donnelly was on the line, on speaker, his voice audible to the entire room. Edmund spoke into the phone first. "Mr. Donnelly, will you state your full name, occupation, and the circumstances under which you were contracted to perform work at this property?" Patrick's voice came through clear. "My name is Patrick Donnelly. I'm the owner of Donnelly Renovations, of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, in business since 1998. I was contracted on Thursday, March 5th, 2026, at 3:11 in the afternoon, by Mr. Warren Swift, at my office on Coleman Boulevard. He represented that the property at this address belonged to him, that the room in question was a hoarder room left by a previous owner, and that his daughter, quote, did not care, and was not coming back to it. He did not produce a title. He produced a driver's license. I have a digital audio recording of the entire client consult, which my office records for liability purposes. I will send the file to Mr. Crawford tonight. I am fully cooperating. I will testify in any civil or federal proceeding." Then, without prompting, Patrick said, "Mr. Crawford, if you don't mind, I'd like to play one piece of the consult right now." Edmund nodded once. Patrick played 11 seconds. The 11 seconds were my father's voice, recorded on Thursday, March 5, 2026, at 3:11 in the afternoon, in a contractor's office on Coleman Boulevard. In the recording, my father laughed and said, "My daughter doesn't care. She's not coming back to it. She's gone half the year. Just rip it out." The clip ended. The room was completely silent. My father said, very quietly, "That's not what I said." Patrick's voice came back on the line. "Sir, with respect. The file is timestamped 3:11 p.m. March 5, 2026. I have just emailed it to Mr. Crawford. He has it open on his laptop now. We can play it again if you would like." My father did not answer. I looked at my father. I said, very quietly, "Dad." You laughed. My father had no answer. Margot Kenwood, the regional representative for the United States Coast Guard Mutual Assistance Fund, walked through my front door at 7:48 in the evening. She was carrying a thick leather binder. She placed it on the corner of the dining room table beside Liam's wet flag. She did not speak to my father. She did not speak to my mother. She spoke directly to me. "Mrs. Bennett Swift, your husband enrolled this trust with our office on October 15, 2021. We have been quietly monitoring the property for 4 years and 5 months. We are honored to assist with the restoration of room B2. The fund will provide whatever resources you need. We will also provide an honor guard for the reinterment of the flag, if you wish." My mother, for the first time the entire evening, began to cry. Not the loud cry, the quiet one. The cry of a woman who has just understood that the rules she has lived by her entire life will not save her this time. Charlotte was crying too. She was no longer crying because she was pregnant and overwhelmed. She was crying because she finally understood. My father, voice breaking for the first time in any moment I had ever witnessed in my entire life, looked at me and said, "You called the Coast Guard on your own family?" I looked at him. I said, "No, Dad. I called my family." Edmund slid a sealed envelope across the table to my father. "Mr. Swift, this is a civil and federal notice of intent to pursue. It outlines 3 avenues in order. First, a federal interest letter to the United States Attorney's Office in the District of South Carolina, citing the federal interest in the protection of military honor. Second, a South Carolina civil action for conversion and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Third, a complaint to the United States Coast Guard Judge Advocate General regarding desecration of valor items. The letter has been prepared. Only my client can sign it. She has 30 days to decide whether to file." My father took the envelope. His hands were trembling. He did not open it. I did not sign it. I did not say I would not sign it. I said, "I'll decide in 90 days, after the restoration is complete." My father understood. The pen belonged to me. The pen would belong to me for 90 days, and then, for 30 days, after that. And the question of whether the pen ever moved was a question I would carry, and he would carry, for the rest of our lives. Edmund cleared his throat. "Before we go any further, Ms. Brennan's office will conduct the formal heritage appraisal on Tuesday morning. Mr. Brennan is here tonight to do a courtesy walk-through. He needs to give us a preliminary number so the 4 of you can sign tonight." I had not heard Theodore Brennan come in. He had been quietly walking the room since 7:40. He was in his 50s, gray hair, a clipboard, the kind of stillness that comes from spending a career appraising items that survived their owners. He read his preliminary numbers in a low, even voice. The irreplaceable items, the original Coast Guard medal, the original folded flag, the original commission certificate frame, the original journal, the lighthouse keychain, were preliminarily appraised at $34,500. The full restoration of room B2, including refurbishment and replacement of items that could be replaced, was estimated at $94,000. The Clause 7.3 penalty, 50% of the irreplaceable appraisal, added another $17,250. The clause 9.1 personal liability for my father for signing the contract added $25,000. Joint and several liability between my father, my mother, my sister, and her husband, $145,750. Personal liability on my father alone, an additional $25,000. Total exposure, $170,750. Edmund said simply, "The court does not care which of you pays. The court cares that the trust is made whole. The lien will attach to whoever holds assets. If you cannot pay, the lien will attach to the home titled to Mr. and Mrs. Swift in North Charleston. If you sign tonight, you have 90 days. If you do not sign tonight, by Monday morning the trust files in probate court, and the property in this room, and your home, both become matters of record." Mason very quietly looked across the table at my sister. "Charlotte, we have to sign. We have to sign." Charlotte signed first. Mason signed second. My mother signed third. My father signed last. At 11:40 in the evening, a locksmith's white panel van pulled up in front of my house. Edmund had called him before he had left his own home that evening. The locksmith began work on the front deadbolt without saying a word. My mother lingered on the front porch in the yellow porch light, holding a small overnight bag. My father waited in the truck at the curb. Charlotte and Mason had already left in the silver Audi. My mother looked at me. "Sweetheart, we're still your parents." I looked at her. I said, "Then you'll understand why I changed the locks tonight." I handed her a small sealed envelope. Inside was a letter I had written, in pencil, in the mess of the RV Ronald H. Brown on Wednesday, April 15th. Back when I had thought my parents had simply forgotten my birthday. The letter said I missed her. It said I hoped the spring had been warm. It said I would be home on April 26th. I handed it to her unread. She walked down the driveway holding it. She did not open it. The locksmith drilled the new deadbolt into the door behind me. She would read it the next morning. By then, none of it would matter. Patrick Donnelly arrived at 6 in the morning on Monday, April 27th. He brought his sworn affidavit, a folder of contract documents, his insurance contact, and a small crew of 2 men carrying restoration supplies. He handed me a sealed envelope before he came inside. Inside the envelope was a personal handwritten apology and a check refunding, in full, every dollar my father had paid him. He refused to take a single dollar from me for the restoration work. "This isn't a job, ma'am. This is a duty. I won't charge you $1 to fix what I helped break." He paused on my front porch in his work shirt, Donnelly Renovations Esther 1998, embroidered in white on the left chest, and shook my hand. I asked him why. He said, "Because somewhere there's a wife I don't know yet. And I want her husband's name protected by men who do." Then he said, "My brother is driving down from Norfolk tomorrow. He's an active duty Navy chaplain. He's bringing 2 other chaplains with him. They want to be present when we fold the flag again. If you allow it." I said I would allow it. On Tuesday, April 28th, Theodore Brennan completed the formal heritage inventory. He photographed every salvageable item. He documented chain of custody. He arranged for the folded flag to go to the textile conservator at the Citadel Military Museum, free of charge, professional courtesy. He arranged for the Coast Guard medal to go to the metallurgist at Sector Charleston for cleaning and stabilization. The journal he photocopied for the trust file, and the original he placed in archival storage with my permission, on the condition that I be allowed to read from it on demand. He told me, very simply, "Mrs. Bennett Swift, nothing in this room is replaceable, but everything in this room is restorable. There is a difference. Your husband knew that. That is why he wrote the clause the way he did." On Tuesday afternoon, Edmund Crawford filed the restoration order at the Charleston County Court. The lien attached. The clock began. 90 days. Rosalind brought me coffee twice on Wednesday. We sat on her porch in the late afternoon low country light. She did not give me advice. She did not give me lectures about widowhood. She did not tell me her own story unless I asked. What she said, on the third cup of coffee, after I had spent the afternoon listening to paint scrapers down my hallway, was this: "Honey, the first widow I ever met, when my husband was still alive, told me, the man you lost is in the room with you only as much as you let him be. He is still in your room. I see him." On Wednesday evening, after the paint had dried, I walked into the half-restored room by myself. The walls were navy blue again. Liam's nail was back. The reading chair was back. The east window faced the Atlantic. The desk drawer waited. If this story reminded you that family isn't always the people who came before you, that sometimes it's the ones who guard what you love when you can't, please share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe so the next story finds you. Stay with me for the last page of his journal. On Thursday, April 30th, 203 days before what would have been our 9th wedding anniversary, the Coast Guard medal went back on its nail.